Scott?
Good morning, John.
I'm talking to Scott Stevens from BF Saul. If I remember correctly, you're out in the Reston, Virginia area, right?
That's correct.
Or Peter Cameron, who's your regional manager. A wonderful interview a couple days ago. Don't know too much about you. I know you do $35 million plus a year, and that you work out of Reston, and beyond that, I don't know too much. But before we actually get into the body of the interview, just kind of like to ask you where you came from and where you went to school and kind of how you got in the business, and we'll take it from there.
Well, I grew up in the Washington area, and as you earlier mentioned, Peter Cameron, my manager here, I actually went to college with Pete. So, we go back good 15, 18 years.
Where'd you go to high school?
I went over in Maryland, a school called Bowie.
Okay, all right. I know where that is.
Kathy Lee Gifford fame, but other than that...
Okay. We might have had some hang-ups here. Hold on.
Like I said, I grew up in the Washington area, went to college in Virginia, and after getting out of college, I got into residential real estate down in Richmond, and love brought me back up to Northern Virginia, and Pete was doing the mortgage business up here and suggested that I give it a try, and I'm very glad that he did. I really enjoyed it.
What year did you actually start as a loan officer?
Back in 91. So I've been at BF Saul for over 9 years.
Mm-hmm. Are you glad, did you find it useful that you had a real estate background?
Well, I kind of laugh when I look back at when I was in real estate, how little I knew about mortgage financing. You'd think that it would be, for some people, a good bridge from one industry to the other. But these loan officers came in. I really didn't even, I wasn't very aware of what exactly they did, and shame on me for being a realtor and not really understanding financing. But we all know that they're still out there.
Yeah, but I think from the other side, for a minute though, I think it's helpful to have that real estate background. I was talking to somebody not too long ago, and we were talking about the fact that I know when I was a regional manager with a couple of companies, I made everybody go out and get a real estate license, to which this fellow didn't seem to be too impressed because I believe it was out in California, you got to have a real estate license anyway. But my point is that loan officers really do not understand the real estate process, and if you're going to go after realtors, that's a real good way to learn.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, the flip side, is that yes, I think it helps a lot knowing real estate, but in terms of having been a realtor, did it help me with mortgage financing?
Sure.
It really didn't. And obviously we realized that it would behoove agents to understand what we do a little bit better.
I used to sell it. I had some rather unique things, which I won't go into as a realtor, but I used to sell the fact that I was one of the few loan officers out there that could read and understand the contract and actually sit down at a presentation table if they wanted. And I always thought that kind of worked a little bit for me.
We share that trait. I've many times mentioned that, and I quite often will say, "Hey, I've been on your side of the fence."
Exactly.
And I will just say, "Boy, you guys got a tough job," and I think they appreciate that. I know where you're coming from.
I even picked up the price for the licensure and everything. Now, this was for new rookie, loan officers coming in, straight hires, and who didn't know enough to say no. It was like, you will, and they did. And but I think they're all with the better for it. And I think from an industry standpoint, it makes a lot of sense for branch managers who may be listening out there in states where a real estate license is not required to do business, mortgage business, that it's just a real good investment. You pick up half a loan and you've paid back, the deal. Well, let me ask you, when you started your business, did you go after it in typical fashion in the sense that you mapped out a plan and went after realtors? Where did you start? Did you go after builders? What did you do?
And I thought about, before you and I were talking, I thought, well, I'm sure he's going to ask me about tactics and game plan and things like that, and I really just emulated what my manager does, and he was
Peter Cameron.
Correct. And he was very good at really making sure that myself and any new hires, even up to today, that they really get out there and get in front of the realtors. But I fortunately got in the business back in 91, 92, during the middle of a refinance boom. So I got to learn a lot about, our side, just in terms of the mortgage process with pretty good volume right off the bat. And obviously when you're new, you do make mistakes, but if you're going to make mistakes on a loan, better they're refinance loans where you don't really have realtors involved.
That's right.
And I was out there picking up, the onesies, twosies, initially, and that, I think that was really beneficial. And I sometimes, people will talk to me now that are getting into the business, and I tell them, unfortunately, you're out there, clawing for that 2 or 3, deals a month, and there's just nothing else to supplement your income. Like I was fortunate.
Mm-hmm. I think you would agree, though, that certainly in today's environment, it is a long-haul game. I think a lot of branch managers out there, if I could mount a wisp of criticism, when they especially bring new people in, sometimes they're hiring people and are really not conveying to them the fact that it is a long-haul game when you start. Unless you get real lucky or you're really, really good, it's a long game.
Yes, and I 100% agree. I think when you see, ads out there, come join a mortgage group and make 6 figures a year, that's so unrealistic. And my personality is such that I never have been, and still to this day, I'm not comfortable walking into an office, walking into the workroom, interrupting realtors, slapping them on the back. I just, I don't like when people, will come into my personal space or when I'm working. I found that it did take me a while to develop relationships, and maybe because I wasn't quite as aggressive, but I'm a very well organized, methodical loan officer. I definitely take the time to follow up with thank yous and phone calls, and most importantly, do a good job. And that is I would say 100%. The reason for my success is that I can honestly say that maybe just logistics or moving out of a certain area, I don't think I've ever developed a relationship with a realtor that has ended because something that I did. I honestly think that, I can think back to agents that I met 9 years ago that don't do a lot of business, but I still work with. And, but getting back to the initial point, yes, if you're thinking you're going to go out there and just hit home runs right off the bat, then that's not being realistic.
Yeah. I did an interview not too long ago. I won't say who it is. It's a fellow in your area, as a matter of fact, in Washington metropolitan area. And he was a very interesting person. He was very deliberate. And the interview was a fine interview, but it was very deliberate in tonality and the way it went. And a comment from somebody later about him, just talking about him, and it was, this guy is really good, but he's not a public speaker. He is very organized, knows exactly what he wants to do. I don't know. I think he does $40 million, $45 million a year, and and I think the point of that and the point of the exercise here is the fact that you don't have to be an A+ jumping through your pants. We were off tape earlier when I was chatting with you about an interview I did with some guy that I'm going to call him Mr. Infectious. When you see the tape on the web, you can then, everybody out there can figure out who it is when they listen to the guy. A talker unlike I have ever talked with. But I think that if you're not an A+ extrovert, get out there, run like crazy and everything, you better be the other type, some of the qualities you're describing, deliberate, focused, aggressive, persistent, and and have a plan and work your plan. Everybody doesn't have to be a jumping jack flash to be successful in the business.
Correct.
But you better have the other part of it, though.
Yes, and I think I do fall into that category. I mean,
I'm sure you do.
I'm not comfortable. I mean, quite often people say, Scott, you seem like you have a lot of knowledge of guidelines in the business, and you have a good presence. Why don't you do seminars and things? And just quite honestly, I'm not comfortable doing that.
But there's nothing worse, and I think there's a lesson here in what you say, if I can interject for a moment, and that is, if you were, or people maybe that had your type of personality were to get up in front of large audiences, maybe you would come across as someone who wasn't sincere and is, pushing and just not coming across correctly. So I can make a case to you that it makes absolute sense not to do that stuff, to focus your energies, like you were alluding to, making appointments and going one-on-one where you really come across as, in fact, the fellow was interviewing one of them. He said, I try to come across as being very professional. And I thought that was kind of neat. I like that.
And on the other hand, it certainly, you always want to come across as being professional, but I find that sometimes if I'm one of 3 or 4 people on a call list, and I don't just jump right into the numbers and what are you looking to do. If I try and just, maybe it's something very small, that they've made a remark about, that I'm able to, hey, well, let's just, chit-chat just for a minute. Try and pick up on something personal and a little joke here and there. I've countless times been told, hey, the realtor will tell me, he said that everyone they talked to was informative, they were nice or professional, but he liked the way that you were just a little lighter on the phone than some of the other people. So, you do want to temper that being focused, being professional with, hey, keep in mind here that this person's got a lot of anxiety about this process, and hey, I'm here to help you, but I'm not going to be a robot either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, point well taken. When you're out there, if we can kind of update our conversation in today's environment, how do you conduct your business today? I want to hold the part about working with referrals a little bit later in the conversation. I want to pretty much concentrate on your methodology today, working realtors, which I assume is your primary focus.
Yes, it is. And, at the beginning of my career, I thought, well, realtors, you're kind of putting all your eggs in one basket. I should probably develop some accountants and some builders and things like that. But I've come to realize that, people are always going to have realtors showing them homes, and but regardless of the internet and the different directions this industry is going, I just think that the meat of this business, the meat of the referrals, is always going to be coming from realtors, and I've been able to maintain very good relationships over the years, but I'm always looking to add and consistently do so. As far as trying, what I would do to possibly meet a new realtor and how I would get them to begin using me is I do use it is a pretty passive approach. I quite often, my first meeting with them, I'll just happen to introduce myself, whatever, and I will drop them a note. And kind of going back to something I said to you earlier, is I will say, listen, I appreciate meeting you for a minute. I didn't want to take up your time in the office. I respect people's office space. I don't want to be someone that you're going to think is just going to interrupt you and to interfere with your daily activities. But here's a few of my cards. I'm not looking to replace one of your referral services that you have now, but maybe you can. And then maybe I'll even mention an unusual feature to a loan program that I have.
Mm-hmm.
This would be a perfect example of when maybe you might want to have someone call me. And I have just, I really think that has been very successful for me. I would say that those little notes almost 50% of the time lead to at least a phone call.
What's kind of interesting is you say that, people, and everybody's a little bit different. I'm not particularly saying one way works over another, but I think that's a kind of an interesting little technique, because there are a lot of realtors out there, that really do get offended with loan officers that kind of, break in and, stand around while they're on the phone waiting for them to get off. It's just such a horrible faux pas to do something like that. I think I guess my point is, I think realtors appreciate sometimes the deliberative approach and caring about their space. And I haven't liked the fact that you actually tell them that in a letter.
Yes, I cheat and I just keep a little template of the note, just on my laptop here, and I'll find myself every 2 or 3 months, writing the note. But I guess if you wanted to try and make an analogy for us as loan officers, we of course have the mortgage insurance reps that come in, and there are sometimes I'm in the middle of a tough case, and I really don't have time to talk about my kids, but they'll hover around the door like you said, and you certainly don't want to come across as being impolite.
Yeah, right.
But,
what else do you do in terms of realtors? I mean, there must be some techniques you use, whether they're newsletters or whatever you use.
Well, my company, unfortunately, does provide monthly newsletters that I will tend to just send to specific agents that I use, but then also 2 or 3 offices that I have a lot of agents that I work with. I will just blanket even the agents that I don't work with those sort of flyers. But I find attending closings whenever I can is a really good way to meet listing agents, and I think in this day and age it must be somewhat uncommon, because I'm constantly hearing when I do attend a closing that, wow, this is unique, this is special. Hey, loan officers don't normally show up, and listing agents, again, 1 out of every 3 times I'll be sitting there, they'll lean over and say, hey, can I have some of your cards? And I've even picked up deals from people that are sitting there selling their house, and they haven't even, they're either renting back or haven't bought a new one yet, and they'll call me and say, hey, we seems like a good person sitting there at the closing table, and we need a mortgage ourselves.
Yeah, I can't quite get a handle on it. I do have to say, in the over close to 70 interviews that I've done, I do have to say that there have been maybe 5 or 6 people who have attended settlements on a kind of a consistent basis. The rest, we just actually never got into it. Some specifically said that they don't have time to do that. But I think on the face of it, if you have the time and you're working a particular plan, what's better than getting face-to-face time in a quality environment? And I mean, that's kind of the ultimate quality environment. You got people that go into settlement; they're going to be happy and feeling good about themselves. You have sellers that hopefully get a couple bucks, and they're tense times, but there's certain quality. Quality time.
I just attended a settlement last Friday where it's about the 3rd deal I've got from this agent. She's a top producer. I left my office. I was back in my office in 20 minutes. What I like to do is I like to just sit through the HUD 1, and then I say, okay, the numbers look fine. And then I make a joke. I say, this is where I sneak out because you have to start signing your name 100 times, and I don't want you looking over at me, glaring at me every time you have to do it. Of course, everyone chuckles, but sometimes you do find yourself, of course, just sitting out in the lobby for 5 minutes, and there's your top producing agent with nothing to do, with her daytimer, zipped up.
Yep.
And there's your 5 minutes of, hey, and they appreciate it. And of course, you always want to throw a bone to them, saying, well, hey, when you have a realtor like this, I like to do whatever I can, blah blah blah. And but yes, I do, of course, look at where a closing is being conducted, and if it's 45 minutes from my office, then I most likely wouldn't go to something like that.
Right, but I do think you're right, though. It is a quality time. It's a time to engage the listing agent, time to engage the settlement attorney. I mean, you have 3 or 4 major players that are at that table, and it's just good quality time. Although I do. It's funny as you're saying this. My mind was mentally drifting to when I was doing what you were doing a long time ago, and I was pretty young. I could have been more than, 28, 29. Happened pretty early in my career. Went to a settlement in McLean, Virginia, and had a deal crash out. That was wild. It went down over a standing lamp. Wasn't even attached to part of realty. I mean, there was no question legally, but the sellers had obviously made warranties to these people that they were getting this standing lamp, which I never did see. I had no idea what it looked like. But the sellers had exacerbated the situation by taking a couple of the plants out front and digging them up and taking them. That did not set the tone right, but these people were willing to kind of roll with that. But this lamp became a holy grail, and the whole thing it truly exploded over a lamp. And I just can remember the screaming and yelling. It was a wild, young kids just sitting back here trying to keep out of the way of the bullets going forth. And
hopefully the realtor doesn't say,
well, it eventually got put together, as you can imagine, because they eventually it was they used the magic words, we're going to sue for specific performance, and that put it together. But it didn't get put together that day, that's for sure. And I don't think I attended the final one. I don't think I had the guts to do it. In fact, I think one of the parties did not. They did it through an attorney. Let me ask you to kind of jump here. When you're dealing with attorneys, do you try and develop what I think Linda Tippie at SunTrust calls a very professional relationship where everything is on a professional basis? Or do you engage a little bit more on the social side, trying to make them, or not trying to make them, evolving in the friendships? So how do you try and conduct that personality side of the business?
Well, I've gotten to know, I'm out in Reston, and so of course it makes sense that a lot of the settlements I will find the ability to attend are right here in Reston, and there's a lot of closing companies. But I would say that the relationship I've developed with them has been a little bit more than just professional, simply because, as you alluded to earlier, the settlement is a happy time. Sometimes, I feel like I've gotten to know some of these settlement attorneys pretty well, and I have received referrals directly from, quite often people are, working without a realtor, and they'll call and they'll say, hey, a loan officer, and I think the fact that I've attended some settlements, does result in individuals giving me a phone call, directly from. But I've gotten to be friendly with these realtors, these settlement attorneys and closing agents. I run into them, quite often in town or out at night, and I would say that it's moved a little bit beyond professional.
When you're dealing, what are some of maybe some of the newer loan officers out there? What are some of the things that you really? I don't want to necessarily go negative, but what are some of the things that you think loan officers definitely should not do in this business?
Well, and I don't think new loan officers are typically guilty of this, but it amazes me that everything we do, we try and get our phone to ring. I mean, everything we hand out, everything we do, every card, it's got our numbers on it, and sometimes people will call me and say, hey, I was given your name and a couple others. You're the first person I've called, and and I'll fortunately sometimes be able to even get an appointment, even though I'm the first one. And it'll amaze me that sometimes I'll meet these people, 1 or 2 days later, and they'll say, the other two people never even called me back. And I know you reach a point in a career where you're very busy, or you have enough business that you don't need more, but how amazing is that even if someone was on vacation, that no one else was covering their phone calls, or and sometimes these are from very good realtors, and and that point isn't lost the next time I talk to the realtor either. I don't want to make it sound like it's cutthroat, but we all have a purpose, and if the purpose is to get referrals, you might want to say, hey. You might want to know something that, or I will sometimes even ask the customer to possibly mention that next time they saw the realtor, so it doesn't
sure.
appear that it's cutthroat.
Yeah, I like that. Nothing like a little reference point.
Yeah.
What's interesting? I'm going to make an observation in the sense that I have talked to most of the people that I talk to do at least 30 or 40 million a year, most considerably more. I don't think I've ever talk to somebody doing an interview where they didn't indicate how important it was to return a phone call, no matter how many hundreds of millions they're doing, to return a phone call as fast as you can. So I'm going to say, just by deduction, I'm going to say that there are probably a lot of loan officers out there that really can't get to your level And if they want to look to inward to what's creating part of the problem, not all the problem, but part of it, that's an area they ought to be looking at. I think there's a lot of lazy loan officers out there that, you know, even if they return the call, they think it's acceptable to return it an hour later. That's within their scope of giving good service.
And quite often I probably do this on a daily basis. Sometimes I'll get a page, and it's impossible for me to spend 20 minutes with that person at that time. But I will call them back immediately and say, hey, thank you very much for calling my pager. I'm in the middle of something right now, and I'm not going to be able to devote 10 or 15 minutes like I'd like to. Can I call you back at this time? Can I call you in the evening? That's
great.
That's fine. That's great. And and then you don't have this. Gosh, I've got these unreturned phone calls in the back of my mind.
And even if you lose a deal over that, if they need something that's urgent, you can't provide it. The very fact that you called back immediately to say this is what I'm doing gives you an enhanced credibility. You will not lose that person.
Right. And you just reminded me of something. There's one of the big Long and Foster offices here in Reston has a delightful Scandinavian woman that answers the telephones for them, and she a couple of months ago said to me, oh, this must be Scott. She goes, you always, every time someone tells me that they've paged you, she said the next time the phone rings, it's always you. And obviously, maybe realtors are getting phone calls returned quickly, regardless of whether the loan officer's lazy or not. Maybe it's more customers, but she took the time to tell me, and that's good. I mean, obviously she's talking to all these realtors on a daily basis, and who knows, maybe she's putting good words in for me, saying, oh, that's Scott. He calls back immediately.
And I'm going to take a guess. Does that have Celia Giroux and Bonnie Hawkness in it?
That's actually there's two Long and Fosters out in Reston, and that's the other one.
That's the other one. Okay. Yeah. Well, that one that I'm talking about, that is a huge office, as you know. And there was a time in my career where I owned that office.
Really?
Lance Lancedale was the manager there, and it was a cranking office, and I literally owned that office. I pretty much got every deal coming out of there. It was one of my major producers. Those people, a lot of them are still around, very successful.
Yeah, the agency just like they're still there. But yeah, Long and Foster, actually has three offices within, I would say, 5 miles of one another. So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, back then that was the only game in town. In fact, I sold one of the first pieces of real estate in Reston when I was very young, long time ago. Anyway, to kind of move on, let's talk about get off the subject of realtors for a little bit, and let me ask you if you have made any kind of concerted effort, and would you recommend that loan officers do it, working what I call outside the box with either CPAs or settlement attorneys or whatever?
I haven't had a lot of success with it, but on the other side, I haven't really devoted I've never made a concerted effort to really try and get organized.
Let's just kind of skip this and go on to my next subject, and let's talk about the follow-up and developing relationships with clients and what you do to maintain that database and relationship. First off, do you have a database?
I do.
And what do you use?
And what I will do, and not for every customer, but typically, I would say 7 or 8 a month, I am sending them a thank you note. I'm sending it to their office, and I'm enclosing 3 or 4 business cards in it. I think sending to the office, it helps me with my customer referrals. I do get a lot of previous customer referrals, but I just say, thank you very much. I send it to his office at Nextel. Say, hey, would you mind sticking these cards in your drawer? If anyone at work ever mentions it. And I think if you send those things at home, at least I'm probably guilty of it. Someone sending something like that to my house, I don't really find people talking to me about their mortgages and things like that while I'm at home. And oh boy, hey, I've got you should call my guy, but all my stuff's at my house. I sometimes will get calls from people, hey, you helped so and so a year ago, and he gave me your card. That tells me that those cards I sent a year ago were still sitting in the back of his desk drawer. So I think that's And I know a couple other loan officers in here have adopted it and have mentioned that they've had good success with it as well.
In a way, it kind of makes sense if you're. In fact, I kind of like that a lot. The more I think this through, versus sending something to somebody's home when they're at an office, they're in an office environment, and they're getting that. And maybe there's been talk around the water cooler or whatever. Someone buying a home. You're right. There's an opportunity right there for that person to make use of that card. And I like that.
But as far as postcards to the house and things like that, I've done that. Over. I haven't done it consistently in my career, but I would say in the last year and a half, I don't think I've done anything to the home, for customers. But I'm sure that is a it's a good system. But
well, I like that concept of working offices instead of homes. I think there's a certain legitimacy. I think you can get other people on the other side that like working homes. Once again, it's whatever works for you, and the proof is in the business you get. I mean, we sit here and talk all day long, but the proof is in how you do it. I've had some people that I've interviewed that have been very definitive in the fact that they only need to send stuff maybe 2 or 3 times a year. That if they have worked a deal and they find if they send something monthly, that it doesn't bring them any more business. So, everybody's got a system, and it's really what works for you. Now, you get a lot of support out of your company too. I don't want to turn this into a company interview, but I know BF Saul is a really solid company, been around a long time, and they really support their people. And I just wonder maybe if you cover the importance, though, in general, of a company supporting their loan officers.
Well, and I've never been anyplace else.
Yeah, that's fine.
Mm-hmm. So I will, very often. I mean, you spoke with Pat Maloney in my office, who had been, in the broker shops and things like that, and I will hear them refer to the fact that we really do, we have it good here. There is a lot of support. I couldn't imagine doing what I do and not having the upper management people that I can bounce questions off of and scenarios, and having to ship a package off to an investor. My hat's off to the brokers that can do that successfully, because I just don't think I like to get my answers quickly. I like to be able to provide the realtors and the customers with answers quickly, and I just so from an operational support standpoint, we really do have good support here. But then, even we touched on the marketing and things like that, and it is good to have a nice, solid platform, supporting all of us.
Mm-hmm. I think it's. I go a step beyond that. I think it's critical. I do note that in the people that I talk to, unfailingly, they have support staffs. Either they've been there a long time, or they've developed good relationships, or they have some sort of a system in place. I did an interview recently with someone who made a very strong point that by the time that person comes into whether he sees him or not, that person is virtually approved. There's been a conversation on the phone, went into a laptop, as much information, in some cases the whole 1003 put together almost without them knowing exactly what they've done. And so when they come in, either has an approval subject to, an appraisal, whatever, runs it through LP, but in essence is ready for quality time.
Right, and BF Saul has really embraced, all the technology of the business now, and just kind of stepping back to the days of the shipping out the packages, I can't imagine doing things the old way now. Having to get the 2 years tax returns and all of that. They've put the technology right at our fingertips. And you said LP, so I thought, well, it sounds like he's talking about someone in my company. But then, when you said LP, I was like, well, it's not us, because we're DU.
DU. Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, we have LP in the back room, but yes, quite often people say, oh, you're just saying that I'm approved, even though just because I've given you limited info. Like, no, I'm telling you unequivocally in writing that you're approved, and it is so. I mean, just the industry, moving towards this automation. I just love it.
Yeah, I think that's one of now, even though you just got in my lexicon, you're kind of a young kid getting in '91, but I think even you would have to recognize, going back just that short period of time, that the world in terms of processing and technology really has turned upside down since '91.
Oh yeah, and we're told by people in the industry that even though everyone has access to this technology, I've heard figures as low as 10% are actually using it. I had this realtor call me yesterday. I sat down with some people on Tuesday, and they're going to settle. They're going to settle on the 10th. They're going to settle next Thursday. This is a clean deal. They're putting 10% down. We're putting them on a no PMI program. DU approved them, and they had their pay stub and bank statement, and they're done. Well, this RE/MAX agent who I've met these people as a referral from another customer, so the agent doesn't know me, but he is just on pins and needles. He's not going to believe it until he sees it. But I'm of course telling him, well, I'm going to I'll just keep talking and I'll prove it to you, and then you can send me your next equipped one. So, but automation is certainly. We've always been able to do quick deals, but the back room doesn't even mind these ones. They're already coming back. They're approved, and just as long as the appraiser can turn it around, we're fine.
I just wrote a letter, sent something to a fellow named Joe Bryant, and Joe is a senior VP and general manager of the real estate industry, which I think in this case covers the mortgage industry, for eOriginal. And they're out of Camden Yards in Baltimore, and it's a group of brainy brains who have put together a company. Most of them have PhDs and kind of rocket scientist type guys, but they put together a company that seamlessly integrates everything with no paperwork. And they just had the first announcement. Clinton a couple months ago signed legislation on the Electronic Signatures Act. 5 days after that, they did the first paperless transaction in history in the United States. And they did it out of Florida. And what's so interesting, when we're talking a little bit about the future and what's going to be taking place, they went to a state where, I believe it was Florida, where you have to have everything in place to be able to do this. To be able to record something in a courthouse electronically, for example. Anyway, Florida kind of fit the bill. This deal was done because I read I went in the internet, read quite a bit about it. This deal was from start, literally the start, and I'm not saying they weren't prepared and ready to go, but it was from start to closing was done in 3 hours, and it was in the secondary marketing pools, and had been sold and everything, and transferred 2 hours later. In 5 hours, the whole deal had been done, from start to securitized.
What kind of discounted point structure you get for that?
Yeah, you pay 10 points, but a lot of overage. But I think in terms of technology, and I don't want to turn this into a technology interview, but you have raised a couple issues on the getting stuff done and how things have changed. I think we're going to see more of this, where you're going to be able literally to get pricing depending on the scoring. It'd be risk-based pricing. Won't be any such thing as price sheets or quotes. You just put the stuff in. It'll crank it out, get an approval right away. You will not need an appraisal. The appraisal will get pulled in from databases. That'll be statistically within the mean, and it'll be basically for those people that have good credit histories. Slap done. Well, we can go to settlement. Is tomorrow too soon? Right. That's where we're headed, and I think that will help the realtors too, in terms of homes will turn over faster. People will have assurances. It's going to make the industry just a lot better. Any final comments that you might have? Any advice out there for loan officers, new or old?
I'm sorry?
Any final advice out there for loan officers, new or old?
Or old. Well, no. I mean, we pretty much touched on the basics of the business, and as you asked that question, I'm trying to think of something, maybe out of the ordinary, but nothing's jumping into the forefront.
Well, that kind of fits in the mold of the interview. You sound like you're very deliberative and you have a plan, and more importantly, you work your plan. And I think that's the message out there. It doesn't make any difference what plan you have, just so you have a plan that works, number one, and second, that you are deliberate and stick with that plan.
And I think that my plans, my systems, I don't work a lot of hours. I mean, my wife might tell you differently, but I have not worked on. I'm available on weekends by pager, but I have not. I have not met a customer on a Saturday or a Sunday. Maybe on one or two occasions in the last couple of years. I have 4 children, so the weekends are very important to me. And, I'm a homeboy. I like to be home. I work hard when I'm in the office. I certainly find time to a little chit chat here and there, but we've got a good group in here. But I think you can do this business well, and you don't have to work 80 hours a week. You really
right. Well, I think that's the biggest. Having been on the realtor side when I was young, and then loan officer, that was the biggest structural change for me, because I had 2 young kids at the time. And as a realtor, of course, you're out there every Saturday and Sunday and driving around, and you really cannot be available on weekends because that's your time to do your touring and writing contracts and whatever. But loan officer, if you structure it right, and if you so want to do this, you have the magnificence of the pager and beeper. And, you can live by the beeper, die by the beeper, but the beeper really helped my marriage. It freed me up to do whatever I wanted. The beeper rang, and in those days you just got a little beep, beep, a little chirp, and you would call your answering service to get the message. But I can remember being in a movie theater in Vienna watching, I remember the movie. It was one about all these bodies strung up on strings, and Coma. And I can remember being in there, getting 2 beeps, going out, making a phone call. I don't know, made like $1,000 watching this movie, and still got to watch the movie. And I thought that was kind of a neat thing. So technology can help you, especially in our business. Well, look, I want to thank you so much, Scott, for taking the time to talk to us. It was wonderful. You have a plan. It's a methodical plan. You obviously work it. You've been successful at it. And I think the points that you made are very valid, and I think there's a lot of people out there that will take note of it. So thanks so much, and we'll keep in touch.
Thank you.
Thanks.